Okay, obviously, atheists come in all shapes and sizes, and inevitably, whenever I offer any kind of argument about atheism or against atheism, people will say, not all atheists believe that. Not all atheists believe the same thing. That's a straw man argument. And that's true, not all atheists believe the same thing. But a 10-minute YouTube video doesn't allow me to address every variation of atheism that exists. Nor is it my goal to refute every instance of that common creed. Instead, I'm simply trying to address people who subscribe to a popular form of atheism, especially a kind that I interact with a lot on YouTube and that I see on certain channels, and to invite them to reconsider the logical coherence of their position. And if what I describe doesn't align with your particular form of atheism, then you can be confident that I'm not addressing you, and then therefore there's no need to be defensive. So the particular kind of atheism that I'm addressing in this video is the kind that says that only what can be materially observed and empirically measured is real, and that if you want to assert anything as true, that is the kind of evidence that you need to provide. And it's on those kinds of grounds that they accuse religious believers of being superstitious for not being able to provide empirical evidence for our religious claims. So it's this kind of atheist that I address this question to, because I just don't think that they can answer it. I've done a lot of searching myself to see, are there atheists out there? Are there commentators? Are there even scholars who answer this? And I don't seem to be able to find one that is satisfying. The question is slavery wrong? And the reason I ask that question is because virtually all respectable people will frantically trip over themselves to be the first to affirm that, yeah, it's wrong. Slavery is definitely wrong. And I even hear many atheists accuse the Bible of being morally inferior for not going far enough in its condemnations of slavery. But I don't think that the atheist of the variety that I described earlier can answer this question sufficiently. By that, I don't mean that they don't have answers, just that their answers are illogical and that they expose an inconsistency in the kinds of evidence that they demand of others to account for their beliefs. Because if you're going to logically account for the truth of a statement like slavery is wrong, you have to be able to define the terms of that statement. Slavery is easy enough to define, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. But the word wrong is one that I've never heard defined in a way that is consistent with atheism. Because if you're going to define something logically, you cannot include the thing that you're trying to define in your definition. That would be circular reasoning and therefore fallacious. For example, if I asked you, what is a honeybee? And you said, well, it's a bee-like creature that makes honey. I would be fully within my rights to accuse you of failing to answer my question. All you said is that a bee is a bee. And that's obvious enough. But what's also true is that we can't use undefined synonyms in our definitions of a thing either. So if you ask me, what is a cat? And I said, well, a cat is a feline creature that humans have a disordered amount of affection for. Well, feline is just a synonym for cat. So all I've said, again, is a cat, which does nothing to define what it is. It just keeps us going in circles. And unfortunately, every time I've heard an atheist give an account for morality, which then allows them to use words like right and wrong logically and coherently, this is the exact thing that they do. Like one article I read said that morality is simply whatever prevents suffering and increases well-being. But all they've done, according to this definition, is made suffering synonymous with evil and well-being synonymous with goodness, never really defining any of them. And furthermore, they're not even accurate synonyms. Suffering isn't simply wrong or evil. In fact, I can think of all kinds of instances in which varying degrees of suffering can produce something that is widely considered good, such as like chemotherapy or surgery. Exercise is almost universally recognized as a good thing in the right place and at the right time. But the first time I went running as a way to get back in shape, the experience was so unpleasant for me that I nearly threw up. Self-sacrifice and self-denial seem to me to be traits that most people recognize as being honorable, but almost always introduce a degree of suffering. We have monuments in virtually every city where I live commemorating those who died in the wars of the 20th century. So was it wrong for them to suffer and die for those causes? So it seems that not only is morality and right and wrong not defined by that definition, the synonyms that they attempt to smuggle in as substitutes for the terms that they are trying to define in a circular way aren't even good synonyms. Many others have tried to argue that morality is simply what has been agreed upon as a social contract, which can accumulate into something like a legal system or the law. But this begs for a definition of the social contract or the law. If you reply that the social contract is an agreement about what is right and wrong, then all you've done is made the social contract or the law synonymous with morality. And again, you're back to arguing in circles. If I ask you what is morality and you say that it's the social contract about what is right and wrong or the law, and I follow up by asking, okay, can you define what the law is? And you say it's a series of documented statements about what is right and wrong. Do you not see how we're just going in circles without ever defining any of the things that we're talking about? Furthermore, it fails to account how we can judge one instance of a social contract or a legal system against another. How can we say that the legal system that allows slavery are bad and the legal systems that prevent it are good unless morality somehow sits outside and above legal systems and social contracts? Because that's the question that's being asked here. Is slavery wrong? Are systems that allow slavery wrong? I'm not asking, do some people create legal systems that outlaw it? Obviously, that's a question that doesn't need to be asked. The question is, ought it to be against the law for the sake of what is morally good? So again, not only is the social contract theory fallacious for using circular reasoning, it doesn't even use a well-thought-out substitute for morality. And the reason we always end up with these absurdities is because morality can't be accounted for empirically without obscuring it behind some poorly assessed substitute, which is by definition circular reasoning, and which always offers a substitute that falls absurdly short of whatever it is that we mean by morality. So an atheist can't actually say that anything by that measure is right or wrong and truly mean what they're saying without sacrificing their own logical consistency. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not saying that an atheist can't be moral or that they don't have a moral conscience. What I am saying is that they can't account for that morality logically. For them, it's something like social conditioning or just feelings about something. But whatever it is, it's not rational. Now, at this point, it might be fair to demand of me the thing that I've been asking atheists for, which is, what's my definition of morality? So morality is a standard of truth that gives us the ability to apprehend potential alternative thoughts, actions, and scenarios, and to make judgments about them that express either approval or disapproval when compared to that standard. Such judgments appear in statements like, that ought to happen and that ought not to happen, or more precisely, that ought to be and that ought not to be. In other words, we are making judgments of an ontological and metaphysical nature, which are inquiries about being and existence. These aren't questions about what does happen, they're questions about what ought to happen, because what ought to happen doesn't always happen. For example, slavery happens and is happening right now in the world around us. And if we say that's wrong, we're saying it ought not to happen. But if we only take our moral understanding from that which can be observed and measured empirically, then there is no question of what ought to be, only what is, because only what is what can be measured and inquired about in this way. Which is why the physical sciences can't tell us that slavery is wrong. They can only tell us that it is, it exists, it has being. But if you're saying it ought not to exist, then you're appealing to some invisible standard that can't be measured empirically, that is used to judge potentials like slavery or not slavery, and saying that one should be willed and that the other should be opposed. One of those potentials, that is not slavery, should be instantiated by our will, and the other should be left on the shelf of mere potentials. And to make such statements, you have to offer evidence of a metaphysical and a theological nature, because there is no physical evidence available to you. Which is why it's no wonder that slavery, which virtually disappeared in Christendom in the Middle Ages, started to resurge in Western civilization at exactly the time when secularism started to gain momentum and influence. That is, the modern era. The slave trade that we tend to think of and universally condemn really only got going during the scientific, secular, and Enlightenment era. In the ancient world, slavery abounded everywhere. The Roman Empire was built on the backs of slaves. And then in the Middle Ages, it went into severe decline. And in certain places where Christianity was dominant and the church was most influential, it virtually disappeared. But then for some reason, around the time of humanism, and then the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment, it came back. It was exactly at this time when we stopped measuring the human soul as an essential ingredient in a person's humanity and reduced that inquiry about what a human being is to only what can be physically measured, only what the sciences can tell us. And when they did that, they found that human beings are far from being equal. Some are bigger, some are stronger, some are smarter, some are more beautiful, some are more agreeable, and more capable than others. Combine this with theories about natural selection and survival of the fittest, and you have the perfect recipe to say some people should dominate others and some people should be utterly subservient to others. It is only when we account for the human soul, a thing more precious than the entire known universe, that we can then say that all men are equal, for they all carry the dignity of the divine image imprinted on that soul. And this is why it is an injustice to place a thing greater than the whole universe in service of cultivating the small contingent goods of that universe for another person. Hey, thanks for watching. The reason I can continue making content like this is because of the generous support of my viewers. If you are able to support the work I'm doing, there are a couple of ways you can do that: by donating through my website or by joining my online community, The Reinforcements. Both can be done by visiting brianholdsworth.ca, the .ca because that's how we internet in Canada. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, thanks for watching.